Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Today's guest is an energetic, strategic thinker who thrives in a startup environment. She has over 15 years of leadership experience in recreation, sport, and aquatics industry, completed 2 full Ironmans, 6 half Ironmans, 10 Olympian triathlons, and 5 sprint. Please welcome the founder of Recspert, Dr. Katie Cleasby. Sorry, how do you pronounce your last name?
Cleasby, and then it's Recspert. Yeah, Recspert, Recspert, like the experts in recreation. But thank you so much for that intro. I'm happy to be here.
I actually appreciate being corrected because then I don't have to, the pressure gets alleviated and it's actually pronounced correctly. So thank you for that.
No worries.
Katie, we love talking about endurance and the endurance mindset on this podcast. So can you tell me how your endurance mindset has impacted your life unexpectedly?
Oh my gosh, where to begin? I always say grit is my middle name because I think it goes back to the pandemic. I was going through breast cancer through 2020, like March 15th, the world shut down. I went into 3 surgeries, 26 rounds of chemo and radiation after that. And through that, I lost my mother. I was continuing to train through for half Ironman Atlantic City through it all. And I was also working on my doctoral dissertation while I was sitting in chemo for 4 or 5 hours once a week. So you could call me crazy, or I'm just really digging into that perseverance, grit mindset. so, and then I let all those things finished out. And in 2021, the end of 2021, we started Recspert, and overcoming all those challenges really helped us kind of set a solid ground base for the things that were ahead for building a startup.
Wow, that's all I really got to say. Going back to 2020, when all these moving pieces and dramatic moving pieces were in your life, did you ever have that inclination of saying, you know what, maybe the doctorate degree can wait, or maybe this could wait, or maybe I shouldn't be training while going? Walk us through sort of, did the multitude of things in your life sort of help keep things going? Did it become distracting? Like, walk us through what that was like.
Sure. I think I needed to compartmentalize to survive mentally, physically, and I know what makes me feel good mentally is training. I, love swim, bike, run, and I even had to be careful of my hair, so I bought a special swim cap so I could continue swimming. and my husband, I would get out of chemo on Tuesdays, and they pump you with steroids, and so I would want to go for a run. And my husband knows that like I'm that crazy, and so he's like, I'm coming with you. He's not one to say, well, you can't do it, because I would just go on my own. So I'm just going to make sure you don't die. And he would run with me. So I think it's about having the support too, to continue on those hard, challenging things. But it was a strategy, I think, for me at the time, because the world was going crazy, and I was also going through all these hard things. And I just kept my eye on the prize, right? Like, none of these things in my life were going to be solved in that moment or going to be fixed within a month or two or a week, right? Like, I was going through 3 sets of my own version of my personal Ironman, and I just broke it down, and I found out later that, chemo kills a lot of brain cells, and going through a doctoral dissertation was probably the best thing I could have done. And I didn't get any of the side effects. I, brought all my medication to the police station because I was physically fit through it all. And it wasn't a choice for me. Positive mindset anyway. So.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that point you made about how chemo is killing brain cells, but your learning and your involvement in your doctorate degree was building brain cells. And so that was an unexpected benefit sort of from the doctorate degree while you're going through that. You also talked about keeping your eye on the prize and breaking it down into compartments. Where else has that showed up in your life? Does it showed up in your business or your family life? Can you take us how it's not just in triathlon or in endurance training, but where else it's in your life?
Absolutely. Well, it shows up in Recspert every day, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's certainly, if you're lucky, you get it right the first time as a startup founder, but that's not the majority of us, right? So we know the end goal is to have a working, successful, positive product that makes an impact and changes the world in some shape or form. When we started Rexpert, we started with individual coaches on WordPress and a subscription, just really basic. And we just kept plugging away. We've had a lot of different team members come and go, and many challenges come our way with IP issues and all that good stuff. But when I say keep your eye on the prize, I know that I feel in my soul that what we're building is so important and we have to keep going. And so trying to figure that out, pivot where we need to, bring in the right people, ask for help, and find that support. We have an amazing advisory board to continue to keep going on that long-term goal because it's Mount Everest and it takes a long time to climb this mountain and you have to kind of rest each level.
So I suspect we've got audience members that are sitting on the edge of their chair wondering what Rexpert does. Can you describe what the business does?
Sure. It's a marketplace to find recreational activities. And so we found that the recreation sports industry is fragmented and archaic, and they're not speaking to each other as far as the data flow. And so, much like what DoorDash did for each of the restaurants and their APIs, they're all flowing to one app where you can look at multiple restaurants and check out all your food at one app. We're doing that for the sports and wellness and fitness industry, where we're connecting with the software systems for different parks and rec and sportsplexes and pickleball, tennis, so that if you have a family or you have sports activities that you do, you don't have to do those 17 clicks on a county website to get to your checkout system. Or each kid plays like 4 or 5 sports. It just makes it easy and more efficient.
Do you also get into like physical therapists and massage therapy and some other sort of that side of the wellness spectrum, or is it truly sort of county, state recreation program oriented?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's something that we could ponder on in the future. For now, we're just focused on. For my background is in Parks and Rec, and I really wanted to support the Parks and Rec industry first. I think that I would love to support the Parks and Rec industry first. I don't know if they're ready for us first. Uh, so we may back into Parks and Rec, but I know we've got a contract with Daxco and some other software companies, and um, they have 80% of the YMCA's in the country, and so we're kind of starting in that realm first.
So you have to take us back to the day that this idea was born. Um, Describe it to me. Describe it to us. When did this idea to connect all these dots come together? And then more importantly, I think, when did you get the courage to actually go for it?
Oh my gosh. Well, along with being someone who's persistent and resilient, sometimes it's not a good fit when where you are. And so I left Parks and Rec very abruptly on a Friday afternoon, like about 1 o'clock, and drove into my driveway. And I said to my husband that that was it. He's like, "We're headed up to Atlantic City to go do the half Ironman at that point in time." And so I just left it all behind. I literally hit the submit button and went and off to Atlantic City, did the half Ironman on Sunday, and then drove home on Monday. And I thought about it like during that race. I'm like, what do I want to do? And I just knew. And so by Monday, I had a business plan. And at that point in time, I had a different co-founder, and it was a gentleman who rented lanes from us at the Parks and Rec that I worked at, and he was like, "Katie Cleasby, wherever you're going, I'm in." And then we started. So
Any unexpected impacts on the rest of your life from being an entrepreneur? Are you starting your startup journey?
Absolutely. For the connections that we've made, the people I've met, our team, it's funny because we have an amazing CTO and we had an amazing CPO, and we connected through like the Ironman as well. When we
Mhm.
interviewed him, he had done like 2 fulls and 6 halves as well. And I was like, "You're in." No, just kidding. 'Cause, but I do think that there is some resilience that comes with being a triathlete, and just overall the experiences, the rooms, and an increase in my own confidence as well. The person who I am today, prior to going through cancer and my leadership program through George Washington, it it's night and day. But I think that's kind of a process that you go through too when you're doing something that requires endurance, right? You learn about yourself along the way through the challenges, and you can't give up. You just have to keep going.
So you talked about building a team. And we've got lots of entrepreneurs and business owners that listen to this show. Any tricks to building the right team, finding the right person? Do you have a scripted interview process? Is there a specific selection? Is it put your finger up in the air and you hope the wind blows in the right direction? Give us a sense of what your team building habits and methodologies are.
Sure. No, I think it all comes back to the integrity and the values of the company and the values at the top as well, and how we define ourselves and our mission and goal at the end of the day. Our mission is community and accessibility and getting people moving and active and connecting them with the things they love to do. The definition of recreation is by John Dewey, recreating yourself, right, in different ways and forms. And so, um, when I met Richard, he's out of New York, and he's very involved in the soccer community. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's the holy grail to find a CTO who is into soccer and administratively, and he's this amazing CTO too. That was we connected on that forefront as well, and he understood the sports industry. Same thing with our CPO Stuart, and other people who have come and gone along the way as well have those grounded values that what we're doing is bigger. And I think it's about finding people on your team who will buy into those values, but not just because that's the company, but because it's their own too. You have to have a driver, right? You have to have a why. Like every day, what is your why? What is your why for your race? What is your why for today?
Mm.
That drives you, because otherwise you're just here to what? Make money. I mean, you can do that with a corporate job. And it's a lot less harder than building a company from scratch.
That's so very well said. Um, I'd love to know a little bit more about the business model. Is the ultimate customer the park and rec facility, or is it the consumer like me with my children and looking for activities for the spring semester and being able to access multiple different providers in one location? So am I the ultimate customer, or is the park and rec the ultimate customer, or is it a little bit of both?
You are the ultimate customer, yes, utilizing these services. When we started this process too, and like when I talk about pivoting and listening, and when you say like failure is not an option, sometimes I know VCs don't like to hear that, but I think it's important to listen in that customer discovery and listening to people and pivoting. And so our business model kind of changed in that aspect because we were listening to our customers. We started with the Parks and Recs, and then they said, talk to us when you're integrated with our software systems. We use RecTrack, RecSmart, fill in the 100 software systems that the Parks and Recs are all buying for their annual subscription from these counties. And so we did. So we went above those decision makers, and they loved the idea, and we went from there. But so the value is also for the YMCA's and the sportplexes, because we want to see more people utilizing their great services,
Mm.
right? If you think about like all the amazing programs that the Parks and Rec 2 that they provide for the community, so many times they get lost, or they might have free swim lessons for the community. And nobody knows about it because they have paper brochures or a scanned PDF that you have to look through and then pick up the phone and talk to maybe a 16-year-old who maybe will ask your questions, if not direct you to somebody else who you're going to be like number 20 on their next day off from 9 to 5. So we're hoping to change that and support the industry and support the families and get people out there in the community.
It's interesting. My daughters have a winter swim program at a local recreation center. And every year when we start that program, I pick up one of their brochures and I thumb through it while they're swimming. And I say, oh, that would be fun. Well, that'd be neat. And then you kind of leave it behind. And that's the last you think about it. And it's because, to your point, like the downstream registration process and the downstream learning what you just read about becomes cumbersome. And so you just sort of let it slip through.
Exactly. Yeah. So we want to make it easier to support those programs that are happening too. And sometimes if you have, like for the YMCA, you don't really get to see all the programs if you don't have a membership. You have to have a membership and to be able to register for certain things, and that gets kind of dicey. So we just want increase the influx of people utilizing their programs.
So, Katie, I'm going to switch gears on you slightly. Going through your background, you've got this thing for triathlon water safety, which I am curious to know what that really means. Can you talk to us about the work you've done in water safety and in particular around
Oh
triathlon?
my gosh, that was my doctorate dissertation. How experienced lifeguards make decisions in open water triathlons. Careful, you may have just opened Pandora's box. So I did this research that took me to like 2 years, actionable research, but 5 years in total to write it and complete it. But I had an amazing group of people who, across the United States, I interviewed 19 best of the best lifeguards who were guarding these triathlons because unfortunately, people die like a lot every weekend. It's a problem. And there are ways to prevent this, right? And the problem is they throw, again, just random people, 15, 16-year-olds on a kayak who have never been on a kayak before um, to say, guard this triathlon. And if you've never seen a triathlon and the swim portion of it, people are punching, kicking, swimming over, under each other. And I worked in aquatics, and my first triathlon I went to, I brought my own lifeguards, and they were, Katie, this is super scary. Don't ever let me do this again. The $100 that cash you threw towards us was not worth that. Like, I didn't even know how to save anybody. So yes, I did a dissertation, and we have a group now, and we're meeting once a month, and we're bringing some nonprofits to be the first online training for lifeguards guarding open water triathlons.
Wonderful. And for the first time in my endurance training history, have I ever thought about, I just first thought about what it must be like to be a lifeguard at an open water swim. And I've done many, many open water swims, and I'm fortunate that that was my background. That's my strength out of the three disciplines, and I get demolished on the bike and the run. But describe to me, what is it like to be a describe to our audience, what is it like to be a lifeguard sitting on a kayak on a 2.4 mile open water swim with 2,400 athletes? Like, what are they going through? What's their endurance?
Well, if you Google my dissertation, chapter 4 will tell you, but no, that's like 220 pages of fun reading. No, so it's chaotic, it's stressful. If you're an experienced lifeguard, you know what to look for. You know the cues. If they're turning on their back, if they're doing backstroke, and if they're bobbing up and down, their arms are flailing. These are all things experienced lifeguards, and that's what we had to understand is what they're looking at. Um, Non-experienced lifeguards are panicking as well because like, how do you know, right? And there's all these things like communication and distance and environment, and we utilize a couple of different theories. Naturalistic decision making approach, which is like how you make decisions in crazy situations, like doctors and air traffic controllers, firefighters. Like they just go, they just know and go. So that's kind of the situation that occurs. And I signed up to volunteer in Ironman, Maryland as a lifeguard coming up because I was like, I've, why not?
I almost signed up for that race when I came back from Copenhagen, but I I couldn't find my bike pedals, so I couldn't get the training in. That's my excuse at the moment. Um, Taking it from the reverse perspective as a swimmer, right? We're in the water. We believe we trained enough. We're in the middle of the swim. It's probably a lot more uncomfortable than swimming in the pool with a black line on the bottom. But we've got this endurance. I got to finish. I've trained all the way. Like there's a mindset there that kind of keeps you pushing and pushing on the bike and pushing on the run. They have consequences, but they're not as severe as pushing too hard, in my opinion, at least my perspective on the
Hmm.
swim. What are some indicators that us as athletes while in the water should be paying attention to of like, hey, you know what? This is beyond my comfort zone. This is not just like being a little bit uncomfortable and learning from it. I'm actually way past where I should be and I need to stop. Any thoughts or comments or insights of what we should be conscious of?
Sure. Well, I think it's important to know that the support team is there for them. The whether they are certified or not, they're out on kayaks, they're out on motorboats and paddle boards, and utilize them. That as long as you're not making forward motion, and these are things that's important for the race volunteers to know too, that it's okay for them to come and take a break. And that communication piece and that empathy was so prevalent too, that just talking to the athletes, right? Like they come up on your
Mhm.
board, it's okay, take a break, say, I'm struggling here. Just say what you're feeling. And these volunteers are there to help you, whether it's like verbally, physically. What do you need? Right. And then if you have to jump from board to board to board just to get to the finish line, or to get out of the water. And it's also okay to say, that I'm all set. I would much rather see someone do that than have another death out there. Um, but yeah, it's all mental, unfortunately. There are some physical, attributes that unfortunately happen when or difficulties when you're wearing a wetsuit and the temperature of the water, the sun glare. There's so many factors that come into play on both sides.
I remember a few races ago in Indiana and Muncie, they had shifted the race to October due to COVID, and I was doing the full. My wife was doing the half, and the full started probably, I don't know, an hour before the half. And I jumped in the water. And again, I feel like I'm a pretty experienced swimmer. And I got in the water. And I'm like, wow, this is cold,
Mhm.
right? This is just a cold swim. And I've done Escape from Alcatraz and some other colder swims. And I'm just thinking halfway through the swim, I was like, there's no way my wife, who's done half the training and doesn't like to swim, is going to get through this. And so, of course, I come out of the water and I do the first loop on the bike. And when I finally see her on the first loop, she's in her sweatpants and sweatshirt. And I was like, honey, what happened? And she goes, 10 minutes into that swim, I just was hyperventilating.
Yeah,
I've said enough's enough. I didn't do the training. So
good.
it does happen. And I'm happy it's not the other way of like, I really try to push. And next thing you're dealing with those consequences. Um, Katie, shifting gears on you again, give us a little bit more about your background. Like, how'd you grow up? How'd you get into triathlon? Give us a sense of your journey.
Well, you can't tell because I'm sitting, but I'm 6'2". So sometimes height is not so great for triathlon training, but it is good for volleyball and basketball. Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts. I'm a New England girl. I think that's kind of I'm biased. That's where I get my grit. Like down here when it snows and I'm in outside of DC, everybody panics, and I'm like, I'm going to Target. We're going to get our things done. You get your Dunkins, you clean the car off, and you go. So but yeah, I'm New England born and raised. And obviously, when you're 5'10" in fifth grade and you're wearing your like grandmother's Land's End, because there weren't tall clothes back then, you're handed a basketball. Like, you shall play basketball. So I did for a little bit. And then I switched to volleyball, played volleyball at Springfield College for my undergrad for a couple years. And then, played volleyball through my 20s. And we did 7 marathons, got into running. I started with Girls on the Run. So I was a phys ed
Mm.
teacher, and that was my journey into triathlon was the running. Did a 5K with the girls. Love that program. I can't speak highly enough of Girls on the Run. And then what happens when you've done 7, including Boston? You're like, "Well, what's next?" You gotta add more things, right? Like, now we do swim and biking. So, of course, I started with sprints and Olympics in New Hampshire, and then, we did our first half Ironman in Syracuse, New York, and then when we came down to Virginia, I joined Team Z, and that was when I was ready to do the full. Yeah.
Anything on the calendar at the moment?
I Taking a break, which is the hardest thing in the whole world this year. Just focusing on fun rides. I'm signed up for a half in Baltimore Runnings Festival right now, but next year I'll come back and do probably full Florida Ironman. And we're moving to the West Coast eventually at the end of 2024. So I'm really excited to try out some new races and meet some new people and refresh. I think you have to fall in love with it too. I think you can get burnt out.
Mm.
I did 2 years back to back of, I don't know how you've done it with how many you've done over and over again, but I needed a break after 2 years.
Yeah, you mentioned these 2 words, fun and rides, and you put those together. I've never heard those 2 words, but no ride is fun. Yeah.
I should be asking you what your secret is for 12 Ironmans and your grit.
Yeah, well, it's 9, but 12 is the goal for sure. I wanna get that Kona lottery spot. It's a lifestyle for me. It allows me to enjoy podcasting. It allows me to drink wine on the weekends when I should be, you know, watching the calories that come into my mouth. And ultimately, it was something I connected with my wife and my family around. Like my Monique got me into this 10 years ago, and she had done 3, and then we did, I guess, 6 together, and then I've done another 3, and the kids come, and it's a big family vacation. So it's just a community builder for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. You have to be fearless too, I think, at that point and just say, why not? Everyone always asks, like, why do you do this? Like, because you can.
That's right. Jumping back to Rexpert, and people that are listening who want to utilize that service, are you across the country? Are you localized at the moment? Give us a sense of where you are in the life cycle.
Right now, in this moment, while doing this podcast, we are not in market yet. We will be in this fall. So, these building out these API integrations with all these software companies is not an easy lift. So, um, we're very excited to see to get to market. But I'm hoping that by the time, yeah, everybody hears this and listens to this, they'll be out and running.
So let's assume one of our audience members has a magic wand and she's going to wave it for you. What would that produce? What do you need for your business? How can this community be helpful for you?
Oh, yeah. Well, definitely utilizing the website. So once we do release and launch, we'll have access to some of the recreation and YMCA's that each of these software providers utilize. And so all their programs will be flowing through Recspert. And so you'll be able to utilize Recspert. And so obviously, customer discovery is so important no matter what you're building. And we want to hear your feedback. So, make changes and pivot if we need to, the UX, UI, how user friendly it is. Yeah, so that would be helpful once we do launch.
Fantastic. And we'll include those links in our show notes for sure. Um, Another thing I'm passionate about is endurance leadership. And one of the principles that I follow is maintaining focus, right? Prioritizing your key goals and dedicating the resources to achieve them.
Mhm.
Anything resonate with you when I say those words or come to mind that you want to share with the audience?
I think I would have to say that I lean on our team for that too, because I'm a big thinker. I'm always thinking 10 steps ahead and what we could do and how, wouldn't it be exciting, that the visionary piece of me. And then the team kind of reels us back and like, what can we do right now? So I think it's that challenge when you're at the top level too, and you're building something between what could be, but what's actual, what you can do right now. And then vice versa. When we do have challenges and we feel like that tech, is a challenge or whatever, what can we do right now to get to that big vision? So kind of moving both ways between that spectrum, I think is important.
That's super helpful. So we've got a starving entrepreneur, female entrepreneur in our audience today, and she's considering starting her own business, what would be some words of advice?
Don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. No, you need support and definitely. I did a great program called ICAP, Innovation Commercialization Assistance Program through Virginia, and they encouraged us to go out and talk to as many people we could before we built it. Uh, that no longer, if you build it, they will come. It's, you have to understand the problem, understand the customer journey, and then you build it. It took us, 2 or 3 times, even though we did all that work to get there. Um, but obviously, don't give up. Keep going. Ask for support. It's funny because I had a call yesterday with another female founder, and she was struggling, and we all struggle. You need to have a support system. I call it hashtag crying on a park bench moments. But you get a moment, right? And then the next day you wake up and it's a new day and you continue moving forward. So I would say, reach out for help, build that advisory board. Um, it doesn't hurt to ask. The worst they could say is no. Be fearless, right? And just continue on maintaining that focus through those setbacks. We had so many setbacks, and I know it was hard because somebody who is a type A, who's used to a certain level of success up to this point that I could control, right? Like if I study harder, I'll get better grades. If I work harder in this sport, I'll see better times. And this was the first time in my whole life that if I worked harder, I couldn't move the needle faster. Sometimes it
Mm.
just is the right moment at the right time. Um, and then things start to fall into place the way they should. But I have this rock here in front of me that says patience. And that's the only piece of patience I have. So,
And it's very, very heavy.
yeah.
I do find that the crying on the park bench actually builds character and respect from the team when they see that vulnerability and the leader saying, "You know what? I don't have all the answers. I need you, us to come together and solve these together."
Yeah, and transparency has always been one of my values. It gets me in trouble sometimes, but I think that we're all human, and we're all in this together. And you're right. I like to think I have all the answers, but I don't. I respect people more when they say I was wrong or I don't know the answer to this, but let me find out. Some of the people are my role models, people I look up to. So I try to be that type of shared leadership and on that end of this leadership spectrum.
It's a great experience share. Katie, an audience member wants to get in touch with you. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Honestly, you can just email me, Katie@Recspert.com, or, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Communication is another value of mine, so I'll always respond. Happy to connect and support other female founders or other triathletes, and especially.
Well, good luck being a lifeguard at Ironman Maryland in a few weeks. Thank you for fulfilling that role. I also appreciate you educating me on the water safety and what it must be like to be a lifeguard and what watching that sort of washing machine of swimmers going around for an hour to 2 hours must look like. I really appreciated what you said. Sometimes working harder doesn't really get you farther, right? Sometimes it's about luck in the team and patience, which is very, very difficult as an entrepreneur. I truly respect the work you're doing with Recspert. I can't wait to see that platform go live and us to give you feedback. So those in the audience, please like this show. If you got some value out of it, share this show with your community. Share Katie's learnings and experience. Utilize her website. There's a lot of great communication coming from them. Katie, any last words for the audience before we say goodbye?
Yeah, just be fearless, I kind of live by that every day. Just what's the worst that could happen? I would say those would be my last words. But thank you so, so much for this opportunity today. I'm super grateful and really love this conversation. So thank you.
The pleasure's been mine. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.